All right, what's up, everybody? It's great to be here. Thank you guys so much for coming out. I'm actually amazed by how many people have traveled down here. Who's not from Richmond? Raise your hand. I mean, that's pretty insane. On a Saturday, I mean, there's a round of applause for you guys because look at that, awesome, for our out-of-towners. So, yeah, it's really cool to see people come out. I mean, it's just great to always be in the room with other people who, looking to grow their businesses, learn, network, and you're taking time out of your day to do it away from your families, away from other things you could be doing. So I always know I'm in the right room when that's the case. So today, I know a lot of people are aware, but for those who aren't, we're going to talk about new construction. Okay, who here is interested in new construction? Awesome. I feel like a lot of people are, and in my experience, it's one of the most, by the way, Philip, if I end up out of screen, just let me know. It's definitely, in my experience, personally, something that a lot of people are interested in. I always hear that people are wanting to make that jump, really interested in what that means and how that can elevate their business. So I think it's a great topic to talk about. Disclaimer, I'm not the most experienced builder in the world, but this is something that I do on a daily basis. We've built and flipped as a combination hundreds of homes in the Richmond area. This is an area that I really stay around and flip and build in. So I know a thing or two, and hopefully I can help you guys learn a little bit about new construction. And my name is Brandon Lindsey. I kind of did a little bit of introduction. Philip did as well. But I started off as a project manager for a development company here in Richmond. Did that for a couple years. Then I jumped out, did contracting myself for I was a Class A contractor for a couple years. Started flipping, started building. I also do coaching and consulting. So I've really seen this business from a bunch of different angles, which is why I think that, I don't have a lot of expertises, but this is something that I definitely think I can help you guys out with. So please feel free as we go through the presentation too to ask questions. You can stop me at any time. I love interaction with the group instead of just me up here talking. Nobody wants to just watch somebody talk for an hour, so I definitely encourage you guys to ask questions. Also, other note before I get in, my presentation style is very simple. When I say style, my presentations themselves. So black screen and white writing. I used to always kind of play around with Canva or try to make things pretty or nice, and I just realized that's not my strong suit. So don't think I just threw this together. It's just I keep it very simple. Okay, I've already asked this question, but have you considered taking the leap into new construction? I'm gonna poll the room. Who here is a flipper right now? Okay, and you might raise your hand for multiple things here. Okay, who here is a buy and hold real estate investor, the pure investor? Awesome, it's a great place to be. Okay, lenders, I know a couple of my buddies are here. A lot of lenders, great. It's good to be in the room with lenders. Okay, real estate agents. Awesome. So I think, on the way, okay. I always like seeing what the group is and seeing what you guys do, right? Because I always want to tailor it to you guys. And again, I already asked a question. I saw a lot of hands of people who are interested in getting into new construction, right? But I think I'm also here to try to convince people who haven't really shown that interest or expressed that interest. I'm going to show you guys why it's so useful and valuable to be a new construction builder, or at least consider it, right? So let's talk about some of the benefits of new construction. And I think a lot of people know these things, but we're going to start here because I'm telling you, coming from a flipping background, a rehabbing background, this is one thing you'll hear from every builder who started as a rehabber. I'm never going back to rehabbing. Has anybody heard that before from builders? Yeah. I'm telling you, all my buddies who are builders say the same thing. If I never touch a rehab again, I'm okay with that, right? Now, I still have a healthy mix between the two. That's how business goes. But if I could go all new construction, some years I have, I would definitely do that. And you'll see why. Because number one, new construction is scalable, right? This is something you can repeat over and over. This is something that you don't have to be on site managing as much as a rehab. You just essentially don't have as many surprises, right? And we all know, and it's kind of going to piggyback on number 2, predictable, talking about surprises. We all know that one of the worst parts, if there's any negative to what we do as flippers and real estate investors, it's all the surprises that you get in the rehabbing process, right? You open up a wall, you have issues. You go in the crawl space, you have issues. This happens every single project. You can be as thorough as you want, but you will always get surprises. And that is purely why I think, I want to say that's 90% of the reason why people like new construction over rehabbing. But it's also a better asset, okay? This helps people who are spec home builders and build to rent investors or builders, right? If you're building something to rent, don't you want a better asset that can appraise better, that attracts better tenants, lower turnover, less maintenance, right? You build to rent, you shouldn't have maintenance on that for at least 2 years. You're looking for 5 years plus, right? Maybe thing or two cosmetic issues could happen, but for the most part, just a better asset as a whole is great for, again, not only spec home builders who are selling it, but also buy and hold investors or build to rent investors. This is my favorite part, less competition, okay? Of all the people, and this is kind of going to be the theme of this presentation today, of all the people who are interested in new construction, not that many people take the leap because there are a lot of question marks, there's a lot of nervousness around it, right? And that just opens up blue waters for us, right? You go into new construction, the business changes a little bit in ways that are very refreshing. Number one, I don't have to go look for deals. Here's an example. If somebody puts a cosmetic rehab, like a wholesaler throws a cosmetic rehab on Facebook, how many comments are going to be on that post? That's a great guess. 20, 30, 40, I've seen 50, 60, right? It's insane. And the fact that people are still commenting after 40 is pretty crazy to me because I don't want to compete against 40 people. I want to compete against maybe 1 to 5. And that's what new construction can do for you. Wholesalers bring deals directly to you. The reason that you don't see land on Facebook as much as you see cosmetic rehabs on Facebook is because they don't want to put it out there and get bids from people who've never done new construction before who are going to fall out of the deal because they can't finance it or they get cold feet. They'll bring the deals directly to builders that they know can do the job. That's my favorite part. I used to have to do a bunch of marketing to find my deals when I was flipping. Now people just bring me deals, and it's so refreshing. And that's my least favorite part of the business. I don't know about you guys. I love negotiating deals. I hate finding deals. That's my least favorite part. Okay, high demand. We all know we're in a housing shortage, right? And that's not going away anytime soon. And by anytime soon, there's no perceivable, end to this housing shortage right now. So even if demand drops a little bit, there's always going to be a shortage, right? Which kind of allows demand to always be in a certain place where you can be a spec home builder and have a lot of comfort coming out of the back end. Same with buy and hold investors or build to rent. Sorry, I keep saying buy and hold, but you guys get that in this situation, they're somewhat interchangeable. High demand for new construction as a renter as well, right? You want to get into a nice place that's clean, that's maintenance free, that doesn't have issues. They're going to be attracted to new construction as well. So this high demand is going to be, I'm telling you, it makes me feel really comfortable even as our economy is all over the place, right? You get news on Monday and the market changes by Tuesday, right? But high demand, the fact that we have a housing shortage always makes me feel like I'm in a pretty good spot. Okay, and we could go on, right? I'm sure I've even listed things that you guys might think of, but these are some of the big ones, and I'm telling you, when you make this jump, you'll start seeing this very clearly. Okay, so again, this is really the theme of the presentation. The fear of the unknown is what holds us back. And this presentation is all about addressing those unknowns, right? The things that you guys might be unsure about. And maybe we could pull the group too. I'm looking for more interaction, so please speak up. Don't leave me hanging. But what's holding you guys back? For those who've raised their hand and they're interested in new construction, what's holding you guys back from getting into new construction? Okay, so contractors, right? Finding the team.
Yeah.
That's huge. Honestly, that might be one of the most common ones. Yeah.
Finding the land.
Finding the land. Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
I would say the equity that leaves in the property after I'm done with it.
Okay, so like analyzing the deal, making sure it's feasible.
Well, I want to make the reason I haven't jumped is because I feel like on good enough deals that are rehabs, you can pull all your money back out and have $0 left in the property equity.
Sure. You can do it with new construction too.
That's what I would like to learn.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. No, makes sense.
Let a bank finance the entirety of it.
Sure, yeah, and anybody else? Yeah.
Yeah, the biggest concern I have is getting the contractors to respond. You put out bids and they don't respond, or it's just
Yep.
you have to practically beat them up to get an answer.
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah, I mean, building your team is one of the hardest parts in any part of this business, whether it's flipping, rehabs, cosmetic, but new construction, you need more teammates, right? And then you're beating on more people to get a response at that point, right? Yeah.
When you starting out, the financing aspect of it.
Financing, absolutely. So a lot of these things, I have slides we're going to talk about building our team. We're going to talk about, and here, I'll just go to the next slide too. Let's see if anybody else before I go? Yeah. The process, that's right. That's really, it's as simple as that, right? The process. That's what I was putting up on my presentation too. I was like, I wonder if they know what I mean by the process. But that's right. Yeah. Permitting. Guys, it's like you see my presentation already. All right, I'm going to stop asking questions now. The only one you guys haven't said was zoning. Kind of goes to process. But analyzing deals, we talked about that. Don't understand the financing. Right? Don't have the team. Not confident with permitting. I think there's one more in the process, right? So you guys knocked it all out. That's right. These are a lot of the main things that I hear hold people back, right? So that's what we're going to talk about today. I give presentations to teach, right? I'm really bad at self-promotion. I have things I could promote, and you'll see me try at the end, but you'll see how bad I am at self-promotion. But I like to teach. So today, I really want to give you guys a lot of clarity and confidence with this process, okay? So I love this quote. It's a good transition into actually getting into the information. The obstacle in the path becomes a path. Never forget, within every obstacle is an opportunity to improve our condition. Anybody ever read this book, Obstacles Away? Great book. Definitely, it's an easy read. It's a great book. But the premise is huge. And it speaks to me in this sense for new construction, because I'm telling you, if you can face these challenges that we all just talked about head on, you will, on the other side of this, find yourself elevating your business to the next level. You really, really will. You're going to have blue waters to swim in, right? It's not going to be bloody waters like in rehabbing, right? You're going to have blue waters. You're going to have a lot of opportunity. You're going to have comfort with the fact that you don't have to manage it as much. You're going to build your team once. Once you build your team, you're going to be in a really good position to keep repeating the process. You can scale it a lot easier. So the heart of this, the purpose of this quote is to just kind of make sure you guys know where I'm coming from here is these things might be hard, but what's that other quote? I could throw this one out there. It's the hard that makes it great, right? A league of their own. I think that's a great quote. Never seen the movie, but it's a great quote. So, yeah, I think there's a great opportunity for anybody who's willing to do the hard stuff. And let me tell you, once you do it, you'll find flipping is harder than new construction. You will find that. So these are my goals for today. We're going to get into the nuts and bolts real quick, I promise. But these are the goals. I want to make it very clear what we're here to do, okay? We're going to address those question marks. We're going to try to give you guys confidence and clarity to make the leap. Sound good so far? Yeah. All right, we're going to jump right in. So we're going to hit each of these topics one at a time. First is zoning, okay? And again, my presentations are simple. We're just going to have a bunch of different talking points that we're going to go over. This is where I definitely am welcoming questions, okay? So on the right, let me address this in a second, but this is just like, this comes out of the Richmond zoning guide, okay? But what it's showing you is each zoning has different regulations, right? Setbacks, lot area minimums, parking requirements, density, lot coverage. I just said that. What type of property you can build here at what square footage, right? So these are all some of the main pieces of information that you need to know to get into understanding zoning or just to understand zoning. Okay, so let's talk about by right. Anybody hear what by right is? This is pretty common, right? By right means that you buy the lot, you don't need special use, you don't need conditional use, you don't need to do anything but submit for permits and start building the property. These are great deals, right? If I can buy a lot and just start building, start permitting day one, that's what I want to do. I don't want to go through special use, conditional use, subdivisions, but even though there's a lot of opportunity in subdivisions, these are great deals to get into. So you have to understand what by right is, because when you get a deal coming across your desk, you're going to have to look at the zoning, look at the requirements, and determine if you can build by right or if you have to do special use. So let's talk about special use. All right. It's definitely, who's familiar with special use? Anybody ever do a special use permit? Yep. It's not fun, but if you have the right team for it, you have the right either consultant, permit runner, or if you know what you're doing, you have the right engineers, you can pretty much breeze through this. And I will say, most cities and counties are allowing more and more special use because of our housing shortage, right? So it used to be a lot harder to get special use permits, conditional use, variances, right? But now it's a lot easier. So first thing you're going to do, see if you can do it by right. Next thing you're going to do is see if you can do a special use permit. These are things that you have to talk with consultants, you have to talk with the city, right, to see kind of what your chances are of getting that special use. But there's a little risk there. This might be the biggest risk in the business, is figuring out what you can do special use wise, right? If I can take a lot that can't be built on by right, what can I really do? My biggest piece of advice here is don't let that scare you away. I'm telling you, they're allowing these special use permits a lot more than they used to. And the best builders I know, the builders I look up to, my mentors, they do this all day long. All day long they do special use permits. And once you do it a couple times, you get a lot more familiar, you make the good connections, and you keep rolling from there. Splits and subdivisions, okay? Huge opportunity here, enormous opportunity. And this is where, as a builder, you get to flex a creative muscle, okay? It's a lot more of a creative profession or trade than people think. People think it's I buy a lot and I just put up a house. But it's finding lots with houses on it that you can take down. It's finding corner lots that you can actually split in multiple different ways. It's condensing lots, growing lots. So make sure you always are keeping your eye out for splits and subdivision opportunities. This is where you can make a lot of money. New construction, you can make a lot of money in general. Splits and subdivisions are where you can really exponentially grow to a certain extent, right? All right, so again, I just want to talk about some basic stuff, right? Make you feel comfortable. Zoning ordinance. Has anybody heard of the zoning ordinance? Do you know what that is? Awesome. Zoning ordinance is just really that document that the city has, a legal document that really dictates the zoning requirements, regulations, the zoning map in the city. Okay, so you have to be familiar with the zoning ordinance. All your answers are right here, okay, in the zoning ordinance. That is different than a zoning guide. So I know a lot of people are not from Richmond here, but most of the time you're going to be able to find not only the zoning ordinance just with a Google search, but a zoning guide. Okay, and that's just like a dumbed down version of it, so you don't have to read through this huge document. I mean, it's like 100+ pages or so, and it's all like legally written out. It's not fun to read. This is having a guide and being familiar with the zoning ordinance is how you can get all the answers to your questions. GIS mapper, we know what this is, right? Yep, okay, I'm raising my hand alone, but GIS mapper, another huge tool for you guys to know. And GIS mappers don't only just show you zoning and the maps and where everything is, but you can click on it, you can find if there's a variance that's been approved on the house. You can find if there's been a subdivision on it, right? There's a lot of information that you can find on the GIS mapper. So anybody not familiar with it? Okay. Google search, find it. Are you here in Richmond? If you're in a different place or a different city, county, you can find it pretty easily. Google search or go on the county, city website. But I'm telling you, this is a tool you need not only as a new construction builder, but just as a real estate investor in general. And you can just go on there, play around with it, learn how it works, learn all the different information that it gives you, and it just equips you to be a much stronger builder and investor, okay? All right, due diligence. I just threw this in here as a way to say, in flipping and rehabbing, all your due diligence is going through the house and checking, trying to make sure you don't have surprises, right? You're trying to create a scope of work. You're going through the house, finding defects, finding repairs that need to happen, finding the upgrades, right? That's your due diligence for the most part to analyze a deal. Also, you have to find the ARV. That's not that difficult, right? You just have to be honest with yourself for the most part. But yeah, all your due diligence is in that part, in flipping and rehabbing. In new construction, this is where all your due diligence is, okay? Is not only zoning, but also I want to mix in site preparation, okay? Site prep and zoning are the two biggest pieces that you're really looking at. So it's nice not to have to go through a house and try to estimate rehab costs because we're all wrong. We're typically all wrong to a certain extent. But for this, we're just trying to figure out, can we build, what can we build? And then from there, we're going to talk about in a second, you just use a cost per square foot for your build costs, figure out your site preparation costs, and analyze the deal. So, any questions about that? Zoning. I decided to start off with the most boring part, right? So, I know zoning's not fun to talk about, but I think this is, and again, it's kind of funny to think of that too, because of all the things I put up there, nobody brought up zoning, right? I'm telling you, this is probably the hidden thing that is could bite you if you don't really look into it and learn it. So have these tools, be familiar with these tools, be familiar with these terms. You're going to be able to do this a lot more confidently, okay? All right, more fun, analyzing deals, okay? It's a whole different ballgame, and honestly, it's a lot easier to analyze these deals. The only thing that's more difficult is, like I said, the due diligence is all going to be revolving around site preparation and zoning. Okay, so let's talk about some basics here as well. There is a quick analysis method to analyzing new construction deals, right? You get a lot comes across your desk. It says we're offering this at $40,000, $50,000, whatever it is, and you figure out what you have to build on it, right? And the fastest way to analyze a deal is what builders call the 15 to 20% rule. It's always been the 20% rule, so this is actually my term. I said 15 to 20%, because 20% can end you up in a tight numbers, right? You might not be making as much profit or, leaving too much money into the deal if you're building to rent, right? So I kind of back it down to 15. I like to buy around 15%. So this rule is basically whatever the sales price of the house is, whatever the as-built value is, you should be buying the land at about 15 to 20% of that. So if the house is being sold for, let's use easy numbers, right? $500,000, 20% of $500,000 would be a whopping $100,000 for that lot. Now that's not very common, and that's why I brought it down to 15%, right? Because 15% probably brings us closer to, what would that be, 80,000, 75. So once you're at 75, that's probably a really good deal, right? Me and Chuck are about to build a house, and that's going to be about $500,000, and the purchase price was $80,000 for the lot. And there's, we're planning on making 20% profit on that too. So this is a quick analysis. Now, that's not your final analysis, right? And let me actually go back first. 15 to 20%, sorry, I can't leave out the most important part, less site preparation costs, okay? So if you need utilities hooked up to the property and they are $20,000 to hook up, whatever your city or county charges or whatever your contractor is going to charge, You have to back out that 20,000 out of that 75,000, right? So that brings us to 55,000. Does that make sense? Okay, site preparation are utilities, lot clearing, grading. What else could be in there? I think that might be the main items. If you have to demo a house, that's a big one too, right? You have to back that out. So it's 15 to 20% of that as-built value minus site preparation costs. That's your quick analysis to determine your purchase price. Then, once you determine that, and you're like, okay, this might actually be a good deal, you still have to do a full analysis. This is the same as flipping, okay? You back out the costs. Start with your as-built value, or your sales price, or your appraised value. Back out all your costs, your construction costs, site preparation costs, etc. Yep.
In your site preparation, does that include all the testing, like the soil testing, the environmental testing?
It's a great question. Yeah, so the question is, do the site preparation costs include like engineering, architect, soil reports, right? No. The short answer is no. Long answer is just remember, builders, you're going to see this throughout the presentation probably 2 to 3 times. Builders have a bunch of different rules and standards that they kind of follow, but everybody does it differently. So like when we talk next about cost to build per square foot, how many times have you heard this, right? How much you build per square foot, right? You'll hear one builder say 100, you'll hear one builder say 200. It's a crazy difference, right? It's because some of them include site preparation costs. Some of them don't include site preparation costs, right? Some of them include permitting, some of them don't. So I know that makes this a lot more vague what we're talking about today, but I've talked to a lot of builders. This is the way I teach it. I think it's a very clear, straightforward way of doing it instead of complicating it with a bunch of different things. Long story short, no, that's not site preparation costs. That would be a soft cost in construction costs. Does that make sense? Now, all right, well, let's talk about, actually, let me jump around. Now, don't confuse site preparation costs with soft costs, okay? Sometimes they're the same, sometimes they're different. Soft costs and hard costs are all the costs necessary to build the asset. Hard costs are the physical things that are necessary to build the asset. Soft costs are the permitting, engineering, survey, etc. Now, in new construction, we separate site preparation costs for a reason, because that's the big difference between every project, right? You look at 5 different lots. There's a reason they could be all on the same street. One could have utilities and be sold for $70,000. One could not have utilities, sold for $50,000. One could have a whole thing of trees and brush that's sold for $60,000, right? So we separate site preparation costs for that reason. Now I'm gonna stop there because in a second I'm gonna show you the way we back out costs, but I wanted to kind of piggyback off of what we just talked about. Now let me jump back. Cost to build per square foot. I kind of already talked about it for the most part, but this is what you need to know. All right, this could be one of the biggest things you need to know is how much can I build houses per square foot? Because if you just have that, think of how easy it is to analyze deals, right? Because all I have to do to determine my construction costs is I'm building a 2,000 square foot house. I build at $120 per square foot. I can find out my construction budget very easily. That is so much different than flipping. And I've seen people try to do cost per square foot with flipping. That's not the way. I'm telling you, you can end up in a lot of trouble doing that. It's a good quick analysis tool if you want to do cost per square foot to help with flipping, but it's not like a full analysis with a fully itemized budget that you can be very confident in. All right? Like I said, hard costs for soft costs, okay? I really jumped around. I apologize for that. Any questions on that? Because I already hit on site preparation costs. Any questions? Yeah.
What's your average cost per square foot?
I knew that question was coming. Right now, we're building at 120, 115 to 120 per square foot. Yeah.
Have you taken into consideration, or you haven't taken into consideration the cost of the lumber pack?
What, like the going up?
5% in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah. So if we go, yeah, it's not everything. I've gotten calls from lumber suppliers. window, roofing, siding. So a lot of big items, right? But all of those, all my suppliers are saying about somewhere between 4 to 8% is what I'm seeing the most. So if you factor that into my $120 per square foot, you know, that does go up to 125, 130.
Where are you buying lumber?
Lumber's from Kempsville.
Okay, so you're not, Home Depot, I was in there the other day, 2x4s have gone up 25%, a little bit over 25%.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, Kempsville is the lumber supplier I use. I'll buy easy stuff from Lowe's, Home Depot for the most part, but yeah, it's an interesting time. It's something for us to all keep an eye on. I'm sure everybody in this room is aware and is keeping their eye on it. But you know, we were building back during inflation. I was talking to somebody about this earlier, but we were building back during inflation in 2021, 2022, and lumber packages that were, like right now, if I buy a lumber package for this house, it's going to be about $20,000, and back then we were buying lumber packages for $60,000. So if we can handle that, hopefully we can handle what these tariffs are doing. But yeah, it's an interesting time. Yeah. Yep.
When you're doing your like cost per square foot, how do you know like what kind of house to build? Because like you can look at a street and they could be cookie cutter, and you're like, okay, well that's pretty.
It's a good question.
A street that's a variance, right? There could be some 1500s, some 2500. Like how do you know?
So I think you're on the right track. What I like to do is I like to go through those neighborhoods. Now, I do like to build in areas I know very well. So that does help out a lot. But let's say I was going into a new area. I would drive around or even just go on Zillow or go on MLS or whatever it is and really see what the most desirable size of house is, right? What is the market or what is a buyer for that localized market? Are there families that are, step-up homes, right, where they finally had a couple kids and now they want to get into a bigger house, so you're looking at 2,000 square feet with 3 to 4 bedrooms and a few bathrooms, right? Am I in an area where it's all starter homes for the most part, and it's like, the lower end of the market, right? Which, by the way, in this market, it's a great place to be in that 1,500 square feet, maybe even less range for new construction. But I would start just simply by looking around at what the demand is in that area. You can find out very easily what the ceiling is, right? Like if you go in Northside, once you get above 2,500 square feet, houses sit for a little bit. You don't have as many buyers for it, right? We know in Northside, our sweet spot is 2,000 square feet for the most part. Now, if I was going into like, let's say Southside, that's a lot of 1,200 to 1,500 square feet houses. So it's very similar, but that's what makes new construction great too. It's very similar to determining what the market's looking for, like as a flipper, right? Because now you're looking at selections and design and floor plan. But what's great about new construction is you can make it exactly what you want, exactly what the market's looking for, right? Now run a few scenarios. If you know your range is like somewhere between 1,750 to 2,250 square feet, you can just run those 3 scenarios very easily. What would my sales price be? What would my construction cost be? And what profit am I looking for, right? So you're still kind of running multiple scenarios similarly.
Piggyback on this question, right? So, of course, there's going to be a difference. I think that's what he was trying to ask too. I'm not sure. But a rancher would cost you a lot more than this one, right?
So yeah, you're talking about how would I determine, like cost per square foot depending on the type of home?
Building type, yeah, like if there's a rancher or
Absolutely. No, it's a great question. These are all really good questions. The way I do it is 120 is my mid to high end houses, 110 is my low end houses, somewhere in the middle is mid range, right? So that's kind of the way I do it. Now, it's not a perfect science. Look, I still want you to back out all your costs, use your cost to build per square foot, and then run an itemized budget. I think everybody should be going into their projects with a full itemized budget. But these are all like kind of in the analysis phase, right? And yeah, that's the way I handle it, right? Now, if I know this house is going to have something very specific on it, like hardy siding, right? Hardy siding is crazy expensive compared to vinyl. That's in my head, and now I'm finding out where in the range I want to use. For the most part, we all know this. Be as conservative as you can. Try to do 120 per square foot. Try to be at the top of your range. Then if you come in under budget, that's fantastic, right? New construction is one of the only opportunities we have in real estate to actually come in under budget. I will say that. Flipping is, how many people have come under budget for flips? Anybody? Correct answer. Yeah, it's so funny. I ask that question pretty often, and every now and then somebody will raise their hand. They're like, yeah, one time I think I did, this one project, but I don't believe them at all. All right, so you guys know this. You guys are aware. This is how I back out costs. But the big things I want you to recognize here is, I have stars next to them. As-built value is a correct way to consider your sales price. It's not ARV, right? It's as-built value. So you want to speak the lingo, I guess that's a little tip for you guys, right? Always use ABV instead of ARV when getting into new construction. Now, this is the other thing I wanted to make very clear. We separate site preparation costs from construction costs, right? Think of it this way. If I was using, I'll go back to this topic real quick and then I'll move on. But if I was using a cost per square foot on a house where I had to clear out all the land and hook up all the utilities and demo a house, and I put a price per square foot on all the costs there, right? And then I had another one that was built by right, where I didn't have to do anything and I just came in day one and started permitting. Those costs per square foot could be anywhere from 120 per square foot to like 200 per square foot, right? That's why we separate these. Does that make sense? We separate these to make your analysis a lot easier. So don't use this is my biggest tip. If you're using a cost to build per square foot and you're starting to create it for yourself, just be consistent. Don't be doing site preparation costs and your cost to build for one project and then the next one is just construction costs, right? That makes sense? I don't need to beat that down? Cool. Any questions here? This is for a spec home, right? For sale. But you rearrange this a little bit. It's build to rent, right? All right, new construction financing. The rest of these slides get a little bit easier, okay? New construction financing. This is an interesting topic, and honestly, I have a few notes for us to go by, but new construction is a whole different thing, right? There's many different ways to do it. I'll put them out here. I'm just going to put it all out here because I feel like I'm going to pop around a lot on this one too. My biggest tip here is focus on the right structure. In new construction, doing like a typical hard money loan might be difficult for some people, right? That will require a lot of cash, right? I like focusing on private lenders for new construction, right? And everybody kind of know the difference between a private lender, and these are semantics, but private lender versus hard money lender. In my head, again, these are semantics, so this, you can just roll with me on this one. But in my head, hard money lenders are those big companies, right? The companies where they have reps that are kind of selling the loans to a bunch of people and you don't talk to the head guy and you kind of talk to a rep, right? Private lenders are probably everybody in this room, okay? So that's the difference in my head. Again, you might agree, disagree, but that's kind of the way I'm going to approach this. And private lenders are the main people you want to be working on with new construction. Okay? Hard money can work too. Some hard money companies don't like doing new construction. Some of them will. But I will say this, you might have to come with a lot of cash for hard money lenders. Now, banks is something I have not done, but I know a lot of builders who use banks. Okay? A lot of times they want you to bring the land to the table and then they'll do the construction part of the loan. It's a good structure, right? And then you'll be working in draws. And pretty much all of these you'll be working in draws, of course. These are big. A lot of money goes into these, right? And besides that, those are the main ways. Now you can self-fund, of course, if you have that kind of cash. And if you have that kind of cash, honestly, I think you should be putting it somewhere. This is a business. Here's an interesting question, and I'm just going to pop around a lot today. But when you think of flipping or building spec homes, do you think of real estate investing? Who would consider that real estate investing? Anybody? Okay. Well, I might disagree with you. I think flipping and building is a transactional business, right? You're not putting your money somewhere and just letting it grow and then taking it out one day. You're actually putting work into it, right? So in that sense, you're just as much of a construction company as a normal construction company, right? Now, you might disagree with me. Anybody disagree with me? You can. It's all right. But that's just the way I look at it. I think if you're an investor, you're buying houses, you're getting cash flow, you're holding on to it, you're letting appreciation, depreciation. Think of it this way. The IRS doesn't think of flippers and builders as investors, right? They don't tax you on capital gains, they tax you on normal income tax, right? So you guys are going to have to bear with me today. I know I'm jumping around a lot. But the main point of this slide is to focus on the right structure. What I do a lot are JV deals. I want to keep my cash out of it because I want my cash to go to investments, right? I want my cash to go into houses that I can maybe buy and hold, cash flow, appreciate, depreciate, etc., right? So I want to keep as much cash as possible. Lenders love when I say that, right? Lenders love that. But that's the way I like to do it, and I've had no problems with it. I've done JV deals on every single new build of mine. So I'm not saying you have to do JV deals. I'm not saying you have to do one or the other. My biggest point here is you have to be creative with new construction. Don't think of it as like the normal path of just I need hard money loan, 12%, 3 points, whatever it is. I put in this amount percent, and then we go from there. First of all, hard money lenders are going to look at it differently too. They're going to have different requirements for new construction versus rehabbing, right? But be creative here. Don't let your cash flow get stressed. Don't put too much money into it, okay? Unless you're holding it, right? That's a different story. If you're building to rent, put as much cash as you want in there, okay? That's why I said pay attention to cash flow. Any questions here?
Can you give us an example of how you would JV deal?
Sure. I would go up to a lender and I would say, hey, look, I got a new construction project. I want to do my best of keeping money in my pocket. Now, joke about it just like I joked with you guys about. I know you love when I say that, but that's the way I do it. I could even talk about the fact that I want to put my money into investments, whatever, right? I'll just open up the conversation. Then I'll say, I'll send them the whole deal analysis. I'll have a good full deal analysis with my budget, my scope of work, with comps, sales price, all that stuff. And then I'll say, do you want to split this profit with me? You're going to make more money than if you were just a lender. But you're going to have to put up the majority of the cash, right? And I got to be honest, I've never had a lender say no to that. Now, some lenders want more percent than others, right? And that's where you start negotiating. But that's pretty simple, right? The profit is split between me and you at the end. If you did a hard money loan on this, you would make $30,000. But if you split the project with me, you'll make $40,000 or $50,000, right? So that's where it's attractive to them too. So trust me, don't go to a lender and short their end and then grow your end, right? You have to make it more attractive to them because that's more risky for them. It truly is, right? It's going to be more risky for them to put all the money into the deal. You have to have a good reputation, a good, presentation for them, right? Does that make sense? Does that answer? Cool. Yeah.
Why would you structure it that way where you just borrow the money from the private lender and paying the less amount?
Sorry, what?
Why would you structure your deal that way instead of just going to like a private lender and paying the interest rate, which would be less than what you're actually paying?
Because so the question is, why wouldn't I just do a normal hard money loan for the most part, or normal, percent plus points, right? Well, you tell me, and maybe you could be my next lender. If I came up to you and said, I want you to put in all the cash for the most part. I'll put in 20 grand, 30 grand. I'll cover costs here and there. But I want you to put in all the cash. I'll run the jobs. I'll do everything. But I want you to keep your normal percentage and your normal points. Would you do that deal?
We generally require you to pay for the land.
Right.
We don't want to be stuck with a lot.
Exactly. That's right.
Pay for the lot and we finance the construction.
Well, that's if I wanted to pay for the lot. Exactly. Yeah. So I don't want to pay for the lot. I don't want to put $80,000 into the lot. That's kind of my deal, So that's the way I go about it. I have no problem giving my lender more money If I don't have to put money into the deal, I just run my business like a business. I make sure I make enough profit that's worth my time, then I go from there. Yeah,
So the answer to that is a cash-on-cash return, right?
exactly.
So he didn't put no cash, so his return is.
So my return's infinite.
He's putting some money in.
You're right. Yeah. Yeah, so I'm putting the time in, I'm putting my expertise in, the background, the team I have, the processes I have. That's the value I'm bringing to the table. And you're right, he's right, I might put in 20,000. It's impossible to be like, I'm not gonna put any money in, plus it lets the project keep running. But if I put zero in it, my return's infinite. So if you want to talk about, you want to look at ourselves as investors if we're builders, that's an infinite return. Zero in, 50, 100,000 out, yeah.
Do you normally do all inspections for the land before closing? Or you just close normally like on a month? Like?
Sorry, say it one more time. So,
I'm asking basically, I heard some people basically what they do.
Mhm.
They will do a long term for the closing of 6 months. So
Yeah.
they are able to do all the inspections before closing, even the permits as well.
that's right.
And then they will give the owner a little more cash
Yep.
just to wait.
hmm
Do you normally handle like that, or would you just close on a normal basis?
It depends on the deal, for sure. No, it's a great question. Honestly, though, I've never done it where like 6 months. That'd be pretty cool. It'd be. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Question is, when a deal comes across, are you, in your purchase agreement, are you essentially giving yourself a due diligence period and then closing on the house after that due diligence period? And I don't even think due diligence is the right way to put what you're saying, even just prepare, permits, planning, etc. No, I haven't done that. So I haven't done it, but I think all contracts should have due diligence in it in this situation, right? This is different than flipping, where if you kind of put like a clause in there that says I need to check on A, B, and C before we really go forward with this, they're going to be like, that's the whole point of you buying as is, But with new construction, you can say, hey, look, I need, this will go forward if we get the zoning confirmation letter from the city, right? Or this will go forward once we actually do our due diligence. But I have not done planning and permitting during that for the most part. Like I've not extended a contract to account for planning and permitting. What I have done is knowing that we're going to be moving forward, like knowing the seller's solid, the financing is solid, I'll start pulling, drafting building plans and get the soil report, get the survey done. I'll start that process early. Because you're right, that part sucks. You buy, you close, and then you wait around for like a month and a half, 2 months to get it all permitted, So it's a good question. Yeah. I'll go with you first and then Fred.
I guess my question is, how much of this could I run if I don't have a Class A license?
Great, all good questions. About 20% more. So if you were looking at 15 to 20%, now in new construction, it's a bigger deal, so they're usually more like 15%. Average for contractors is 20% just across the board. New construction is probably closer to 15%. You could get them down to 10% sometimes.
I'm paying like more like 150 a square foot.
That's right.
Doing new construction.
Yeah, so it's a lot
But I'm a
different.
good person like you.
Right. Now, 150, that's right. It'd be 145, 150 more or less if you have somebody who's only charging that 20% and somebody that's running a good job and getting good prices. So that is something to pay attention to. It's a really good question. And what I would also say is, and we're going to talk about building the team here soon, if you're a flipper or rehabber and you have like a full team of subcontractors, you're kind of just adding a few pieces. You might not have the license, but, and it's, gray area, but you might be able to get a contractor that you pay a consulting fee to use their license for your project. So that's one way to keep prices down if you want to save that 20%. That happens every single day of the week. Yeah.
We have people, there's people in Richmond area that are training people to do all of this without any money. They come to me constantly and want us to finance our, I said, no, we don't finance anything where you don't put any money in. How many deals have you ever gone to a private lender and got them to loan you all the money without you having put a dime in?
Well, with JV agreements, a couple times.
Okay,
Um,
that's different though.
Yeah, no, the way you're talking, no, absolutely not. Yeah, we got to, and I don't want my lender to be over leveraged either. I want them to be at their 70, 75% LTV, whatever they are looking at, right? I think it's just a general business principle. I don't like lopsided deals, even if it's lopsided my way, right? So no, normal hard money, normal private money, if it's not a JV deal, I've never done it and never seen it fully financed. I've seen lenders market fully financing things, but that's a little different, you know. All right, any other questions about financing? I think this is a great topic. Yeah.
I don't know financing, but what's your, how much time are you spending on a job site? Since you said you're a class A or something like that.
How much time am I spending on a job site?
Yeah.
For new construction, in the beginning, I'm probably there, footing, foundation, framing, you have to be there quite a bit. After that, you might never need to show up. That's the really cool thing about new construction. You're kind of just directing traffic. Once you get the frame up, once you get dried in, it's another term for new construction that means the house is up, the footing and foundation obviously done, the house is wrapped, windows, doors installed. That's called dried in. Once you get to dried in, you're just directing traffic. That's all you're doing. Hey, plumber, go show up. Hey, electrician, go do your thing. HVAC, go for it. You're just, they barely need you. That's a great thing. Everything is in the plans. So, long story short, in the beginning of the project, I will say I'm probably there every other day in the morning, just showing up, making sure everything's good. If I have to put out a fire, I'll put out a fire. It's probably for the first month or so. After that, I'm barely there. Or I barely have to be there. Of course, you want to show up, see everything. But yeah, it's a good question. Any other questions? Yeah.
Have you acquired the land on owner financing?
I haven't, no.
Is that it?
I'm trying to think through it. Actually, I just got brought a deal that's on seller financing, but it's a very complicated deal. I don't see any issues with it. You just have to obviously find a lender who wants to be in that position behind the seller finance, because somebody's got to finance the construction, Yeah, so seller finance can be great to acquire the lot, but you bring that to a bank, are they going to be okay with that position? Probably not. You bring it to a private person, they have to trust you to be in.
Recommend the seller to be in the second position and the lender to have another deal.
I don't know, lenders, y'all might know this, but I think the seller would have to be in first position. I don't know.
You might not know.
Yeah, I don't know too much of the specifics of that, but yeah, it's, I will say this, very soon I'm going to find out, because I just got brought that deal. So yeah, I don't know if I have a great answer for you right now. Maybe lenders can help out.
Yeah, I've talked to a lot of land brokers, and they will sell their finance, but a lot of times they won't get paid on their back first. So they might finance you for 2 years, but they want and for the most part, to be paid off before you start, unless you're improving it. If you don't want them to move a trailer in there and just start living life, but if you're building on it, they might have a little bit of agency, but a lot of times they just pay it off.
Yeah, especially because of how expensive, like you being in second position, financing all construction, that could be almost $200,000. That's tough. Yeah.
We won't finance anything unless it's first party. So if you got the land financed, then we have to pay it off to be able to finance your deal.
Yeah. Which then at that point, there's no point of being in the seller finance deal anyway. So yeah, that's what I thought for the most part. All right, I'm going to move through. How am I on time? Pretty good? Oh, wow. Jeez. I can talk a lot, guys. I know this. These are going to be pretty simple. Let me just give you some very nuts and bolts checklist type stuff. Some of this is kind of a little bit more ambiguous and just open the conversation. But let's talk about permitting needs. I swear I had a picture. Oh, yeah. Not an important picture, but at least it makes it a little bit nicer. But look, your list is going to be, the things you're submitting to the city are going to be more than this. And when I say that, I mean like your building plans are going to be maybe 10 pages long, right? Your engineering could include trusses, LVLs, and other type of engineered wood. But this is a very basic, easy checklist. This is all you need to permit a new construction house, for the most part. You go special use, you go to subdivisions, you're talking about something different. But if we're doing by right, and even those are separate permits, we're talking about building permits here. You just need a soil report, that's actually what you see here. You need a site plan, you need building plans, engineering, and licensing. When I say licensing, I mean, yeah, you can't build new construction anywhere for the most part without a contractor's license. So make sure you cross that bridge early and figure out what you're doing there. But you also typically are going to need a building license. And I've seen people stall their permitting process because they don't have a business license in that city. And now they have to wait a couple weeks to apply for a business license. And for some reason in Richmond, it can take 2 weeks. In like Chesterfield and Henrico, you get it the same day. But in Richmond, they take a long time. So I've seen people have to wait 2 weeks. They have everything approved, all the permits ready, but they won't release it until you get a business license. And that's across the board too. I've never really seen or heard of anybody building anywhere without a business license in that area. Okay, so it's very important to note. Building plans, we all know what that means. Your site plan, that's going to be a site plan with the proposed structure on the house, right? It's going to show your setbacks, it's going to show your parking, maybe potential fencing, things like that. Okay, any questions here? Yeah.
Are you like a conditional use permit? You consider that in there? Do you start doing it to obtain these permits before you buy the property or afterwards?
It's kind of, so the question was, do I start working towards permitting before we close on the house or after we close on the house, right? And it kind of goes with what we were talking about too. For the most part, you should be erring on the side of starting the process after you close on the property, right? We're all real estate people. We know things can go bad at the last second that we've never expected. And what happens when you pay $2,000 for building plans and the deal doesn't close, right? But I have been in situations where I know the financing is solid, the deal is solid, you know, the seller is good, they're not going to back out, and I feel really comfortable, and I will start permitting earlier. I'll start doing those things earlier.
How do you get a conditional use permit before the fact?
You can't.
You don't own the property.
No, you can't. You can start gathering the information.
Okay, but the
Yeah.
conditional use permit, I'll give you an example up in Ashland.
Mhm.
We had a deal, fell through, we wouldn't finance it because it would take 4 months to get the conditional use permit.
Yeah.
So we financed it, he couldn't do nothing for 4 months and he still didn't know whether he could get the conditional use permit.
Yep. Yeah, so that's the hardest part. And when we were talking about zoning, this is where nobody's got great answers for you. The best thing you can do is start getting in touch or making a relationship with like a land use attorney or like a good permitting consultant. Like I know in Richmond there's a handful of really good ones. I don't know, Baker Development is a really popular one. And you know, they handle the whole process for you. So to go back to your question, a lot of conversation with the city, with the county, with permit runners, with land use attorneys. You can use any of them to come to a pretty good understanding of if a conditional use permit is likely to be approved or if it's very unlikely to be approved. The city does have something called the zoning confirmation letter. Every city and county I've seen has this, where you just submit the details of your lot and what you want to do on the lot, and they'll write you a letter saying, this isn't buildable by right, you would have to do special use. They'll even potentially tell you it's very likely that you'll do a special use because of this lot across the street has a special use, etc. So one part of the question was, you can't pull permits, you can't do conditional use permits, you can't do any of that until you own the property. That is true. But you can get the wheels in motion earlier by having those conversations, and if everything feels good, you can start getting building plans, soil reports, stuff like that. Does that make sense? Cool. Any other questions here? I know I'm really running over time here, so almost done. And these are really easy. The fact that there's even words on these slides is potentially funny. But because we already talked about a lot of these. I mean, maybe this one is important to see, but there's, oh geez. You see my punch list. There we go. Pretty simple, right? You got the biggest thing here is as you're building your team, right? And I think, by the way, a lot of the theme of today is filling the gaps, right? You guys are, a lot of people here are rehabbers and flippers, potentially wanting to make that jump into new construction. It's not a whole new avenue, it's just filling those gaps, right? So you might have a full team of subcontractors, and now you just have to fill the gaps with like a handful of people, right? And it's really not that many people. When you look at it this way, it seems pretty easy, right? Now, you just have to remember, everybody you work with has to be familiar with new construction. This is vital, very important. If you're using a draftsman who just does normal building plans for floor plans or for layouts or whatever, that might not be the person who can get you a new construction permit. Okay, you need to have somebody who's familiar with what the city needs to see. Okay, that goes with framing contractors, right? The person who's framing up your closet or maybe even reframing the interior of your home, that's not the same crews that these framing crews are. These framing crews are 6 to 10 man crews that come in and knock it all out in like 3 days. It's very impressive, but they're not the same people. So just remember that as you fill the gaps, which are just a handful of people, you will also have to make sure you look at your existing team and make sure that these people are the right people to be doing new construction, right? And also, you know, you might have a great trim contractor, but he's a one-man crew, and you want a one-man crew doing the full new construction job, not really, right? So you have to really play that into account here. I think that's all okay, yeah. Any questions about building your team? Pretty simple, yeah.
Where do you find a team?
I got a lot of great tips. I feel like this is another question I get very often now that I do a lot of coaching education for this stuff. But first of all, and I'm going to talk about at the end, but one of my biggest tips for you guys is as you want to get into new construction, be around new construction people, okay? This isn't my time to self-promote, but in my group's called the Rehabbers Playbook. It wasn't the new construction playbook, it was the Rehabbers Playbook. 50% of that group now does new construction because everybody who wanted to do new construction started reaching out to everybody else in the group who already did new construction, and they took them under their wing to make sure that they were very comfortable. So that's a great place to start building your team and finding people. Then there's just very standard ways. Like, I don't believe in finding people off Facebook, that's just me, or obviously Craigslist or anything. I also don't do Angie's List or anything like that either. I like people who either I know that they've worked with, okay, like I said, the network, or go to suppliers. Suppliers are such an underrated place to find contractors. They will refer you to good contractors that do a lot of work, that have the licenses and insurances that they need, because they can't refer a bad person because they're a supplier. They're like public facing for the most part. So suppliers are a good way. Like I said, the network and other contractors, that's my other biggest tip. Don't find them from bad contractors. If you have a bad contractor, don't ask him for somebody else, right? But if you're looking for an electrician and you have a great plumber, ask your plumber if he knows a good electrician, right? They're all in the same circles. A lot of times they go to the same churches, they live in the same neighborhoods, they're, you know, at the same supply shops, right? So to a certain extent, right? So those are my 3 biggest tips to finding your team, yeah. Any other questions? I said I have to speed it up and then I just keep talking. All right, understanding phase 1. This is the one where I'm like, maybe I didn't even need to put words on it. But we're talking about the process, right? I'm a process type of guy. This was my biggest question mark when I got into new construction, was what's step 1, what's step 1.1, 1.2, right? Like I really wanted to know. I never wanted to feel lost. So I know this is an incredibly dumbed down version of it. But this is really just what you need to understand. Everything else is flipping. Everything else is a full gut renovation at that point. But this is all you need to get the house up. You're gonna have site preparation. We talked about that. That's very straightforward, so you don't have to go into that too much. But then you have footing, okay? I'm gonna rattle through it really quick. You guys can let me know if you have questions. It'll be recorded. This might be a great, you know, take notes, whatever you have to do, but like I said, I'm going to rattle through and try to help you out with the process, okay? Footing, day 1, they're going to come out and excavate, okay? They're going to dig up your lot, right? Same day they're going to be putting rebar. Okay, now if you saw my soil report earlier, the soil report is going to tell us what type and count of rebar we need in our footing. Okay, they're going to set the rebar, then it's going to be a footing inspection. All right, after footing inspection, that footing inspection is just checking if the rebar count is right, they have the ties right, they have the depth, the width right. Okay, I can see you guys love this conversation already, but hopefully this helps. And then inspection, then they pour. Okay, they pour, it dries, now you have footing. Okay, next you build the foundation. All right, so now there are different types, crawl space versus slab, but for the most part they're very similar. Now your foundation comes, whether they pour the slab, whether they build foundation walls, that's block, maybe a brick veneer, right? And then after that you're going to have a foundation inspection and then sometimes a projection inspection. Foundation inspection just means they're coming out, they're making sure the foundation was installed correctly, and they're just looking at these things. Actually, they're looking at this. Okay, so that's mainly what they're looking for. Are the bolts, they gotta be the right size, they gotta be the right spacing, that's your foundation inspection. Then some places have what's called a projection inspection, which is just their making sure your projection of the footing is proper. It's got to be more than 2 inches. It can't be more than twice the width of the foundation. Okay, so I know a lot of this is a little too nuts and bolts, but I think it might help you guys. So after foundation, they build that up. Then you got framing. They're going to come out. They're going to frame the first floor joist system, and then you're going to have a sill plate inspection. Okay, I won't go into too much detail there, but after that, then you frame up the house. Okay, you frame up the house usually in packages depending on the size of the house. If it's a 2-story house and you don't have a lot of place on the lot to store material, your lumber supplier will come out with the first floor, then they install the first floor, then they'll come out with the second floor, they'll install the second floor, and then you have trusses. Okay, once you do that, your windows go in, your doors go in, you wrap the house, and now you basically have a full gut renovation. Make sense? Cool. I know you.
Normally phase 1 take from site prep to.
I think footing and foundation would take you a week, maybe a week and a half. Framing would take you probably a week. So really 3 weeks. 4 weeks maybe. Now, 2 things, really big tips, if you want to, again, get into the nuts and bolts of this type of thing. 2 things really slow down phase 1 for most builders, even the most experienced builders. Not ordering your trusses on time, not ordering your windows on time. Now think about it. If windows sometimes, depending on how, like for example, we might have some slow, well I guess it's not a supply chain disruption right now, it's just like an increase right now, but back in like 2021 when we had supply chain problems, windows could take 6 weeks, right? But even normally they're gonna take 3 to 4 weeks. So if you don't order those soon enough, you might be a house looking like this, right? Without windows. Same with trusses. Trusses slow people down. That usually takes 3 to 4 weeks to produce and deliver. If they frame up the first floor and the trusses are 3 weeks out, you're going to be sitting around. So those are 2 things to pay attention to with phase 1. That's why windows and doors is a huge part of phase 1 as well. And so your framing contractor is going to do the windows and doors as part of their scope of work. Okay? All right. You know, I'm a nerd. You guys are probably getting that at this point. So, final tips for you guys. Oh. Be creative. I feel like I've talked about a lot of this through it, but I just had, as I was putting together the presentation, I was like, I really need to make sure we talk about this. The best developers are creative. Okay? I already talked about it earlier. I don't have to beat it to death, but it's not just, hey, I have a lot, now I build on it. Especially nowadays, you have to be creative with the way you find lots, the way you make it happen, right? You can find big parcels, split it up, right? You can find houses that are falling over with a really good price, tear it down and build. We've done that as well. You could do a combination. We've done a combination. Tore a house down because it was on a huge lot, split that lot 4 ways, built 4 houses, right? So these are all different ways to be creative. And it's one of the funnest parts of the business is the fact that you can really look at everything differently, right? I love what I do because every project's a new challenge. Every project I learn something new. By no means am I an expert. I don't know if I gave you that disclaimer, but I'll say it again. But it's a great business because you get to be creative. It's not just straightforward. It's not just crunching numbers or measuring stuff out. There's a whole different side of it, right? Due diligence and purchase agreements, we already talked about that, so I don't really have to go into that too much. But just remember, if you are unsure if it's going to be able to be built on, don't sign a contract that you have your outs in there. We all need outs in our contracts, right? So make sure that you have the ability to say, hey, I'm only closing on this. We're only moving forward if I get a zoning confirmation letter. Network with builders, I've already talked about that, right? It's one of the best things you can do. You start being around the same people, thinking the same way, getting opportunities here and there, getting help here and there, and it will absolutely really bring you into it. Every time I want to do something new, I just annoyingly attach myself to somebody already doing it, right? So do that as well. It's going to be a great way to get there. All right, and then if you guys, that's the end of my presentation for the most part. Yeah. I'm sure I talked way over my time, so I appreciate it, and thank you, Philip, because